All right, unicorns, so we're going to go ahead and talk about the parts of a story. So in our warm-up, I had you think about the different parts and see if you knew what they meant. So now as we're talking about them, you can see if you got them right. So I'm actually going to start first by talking about plot. And the reason I want to do plot first is because plot is the main events in a story, or the things that happen that we usually break down into beginning, middle, and end. And as you might be able to tell from the picture you see on your screen, we're going to do this by talking about the story Little Red Riding Hood. So if I want to tell the plot of Little Red Riding Hood, I'm just going to tell you what happens in the story in the beginning and in the middle and at the end. So in the beginning, Little Red Riding Hood decides she wants to take a basket of goodies to her grandmother. And her mom thinks that's a great idea, but she reminds her that she needs to go straight there and not to talk to strangers, because the woods can be a dangerous place. So Little Red Riding Hood fills her basket of goodies and starts walking through the forest to her grandmother's house. But after she's been walking for a minute, she forgets that she's supposed to go straight there and not talk to strangers, and she sees some pretty flowers and decides to stop and pick them, and to enjoy the river running through the woods and to sit for a while. And while she's sitting, a wolf comes up to her, and in as friendly a voice as he can muster, he says, "Hello, what are you doing here in the woods today?" And she says, "Oh, I'm going to visit my grandmother and take her some goodies. She lives over on the other side of the river." Now at that moment, Little Red Riding Hood realizes that she is late. So she gets up quickly and starts hurrying towards her grandmother's house. But because she's told the wolf where her grandmother lives, the wolf takes a shortcut and sneaks into Grandma's house and puts on grandmother's clothes and pretends to be Grandma in grandmother's bed. So when Little Red Riding Hood gets there, she sees who she thinks is her grandma, but is actually the wolf. And she walks towards the grandma and says, "Wow, Grandma, what big ears you have." And the wolf says, "Better to hear you with, my dear." And then she says, "What big eyes you have." "Well, better to see you with, my dear," the wolf says. And then she says, "What great big teeth you have." "Better to eat you with, my dear," says the wolf. And Little Red Riding Hood gets very scared, but she is able to run away in time to escape the wolf. So that's the plot of the Little Red Riding Hood. That's what happens in the beginning and in the middle and at the end. So let's talk about the other parts of the story. We have character. So Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf are both characters in our story. Characters are the people or animals that participate in the story. The next part of a story is the setting. And in Little Red Riding Hood, the setting is in the forest and at grandmother's house. So the setting just means the location, or where does the story take place. Now, the next part of a story is conflict, and conflict is another word for problem, and every story is going to have a big problem that needs to be solved. In Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf is the one that causes the problem, as Little Red Riding Hood is trying to take treats to her grandmother, and the wolf is trying to get those treats for himself. And then the last part of the story is the theme. And the theme is the lesson that that story teaches us. So in Little Red Riding Hood, it teaches us to be careful with strangers. Little Red Riding Hood's mom had told her to go straight to her grandma's and not to talk to strangers. But she ends up talking to the wolf, and then the wolf tries to hurt her. So that's kind of the lesson that Little Red Riding Hood teaches us. So if you go ahead and watch the next video, I am going to show you what I want you to do to practice understanding the parts of a story.